Totally. I think the album that I'm making now, I can't imagine what it would sound like if I'd made it 20 years ago. There's a lot of influence from the events I run now. The style I play at those events tends to be a bit harder. I definitely tend to play towards the dance floor more. But I think when I'm creating, when I'm writing stuff, I find it hard to make a tune that's like totally balls to the wall. That's a place where I tend to come from with a lot of creativity. I try and find some emotion, I think, in any track I'm doing. It doesn't really matter what that emotion is. But somewhere things sort of shifted from this sort of wholly optimistic view of the future that I think the 60s and 70s and 80s had, to this kind of more dystopian kind of worldview. And a lot of that shaped, politics, and it shaped the world, way the world's evolved. This particular release, I didn't want to create any risk for our label, so I've completely self-funded it.
One more thing.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of One More Thing, where today I am joined by Moakz, who has reached a point in his career that I would imagine most producers, most artists are working towards throughout their whole journey, really. You're about to drop your debut album. This is fascinating. If you are not familiar, Moakz has been on One More Thing quite a few times in the form of a mix and even a release on our very first VA compilation way back 2 years ago now, which is the first time we kind of featured you and first time me and you spoke, wasn't it, John? Yeah. But now you've moved on. At that point 2 years ago, you just launched your label CODENAME Records, and now I'm speaking to you at another really significant point in your career. So where do we all start with all of this?
Yeah, it's been quite the journey, to be honest, the last 2 years. Yeah, I mean, the label, as you say, we've been running, I think, sort of April 2023. So, yeah, just a little over 2 years. And then, kind of, I think, gradually building towards this point. I've done a few EPs on the label myself. There's been a lot from other artists as well. But then kind of alongside that, just been gradually kind of chipping away over the last probably 3 years at this album, really, and gradually starting to realise it. And it's been... I think it's a case of pulling different tunes together gradually and getting something that works together as a whole, really.
Brilliant. So this has been on your mind then ever since we first spoke, when you were launching the label, and the very first release of the label was your release, really. So even back then, really, on the debut EP, you were already putting aside kind of tracks or thinking about a bigger project.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I've always wanted to do an album. I think as an artist, it's something I think most artists probably want to do. I don't know, it's just one of those long held things that I've always, had it on my plan. It's always been in the back of my mind. I don't think I ever really thought I'd do it. But it just seems like before you start it, it seems like a massive undertaking. And I used to write breaks back in the sort of late 2000s, early 2010. And the guy I was working with then, we did a few releases, and I was like, I want to do an album there. And then I kind of did like half a tune for it, and then just bottled, basically. And I didn't really make that many more tunes in the breaks at the time. So then kind of when I set up my stall this time, it was like, right, okay, make sure this actually happens and get it over the line and get it finished.
Wow, there is a huge amount of discipline and commitment when you're creating a body of work, really, isn't there? And when you're inside that, it's like with writing a book or anything like that. There's so much more than just kind of hitting the amount of tracks that one might expect to have on an album. There needs to be that consistency, the details, the flow, the journey, or otherwise it's just a kind of a random collection of tracks. When you're thinking about an album, you do really have to commit yourself and dive in that deep, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, that's where the title of the album came from, The Critical Path.
Cool.
It's where I get into the nerdy side of my day job, really. So a lot of what I do in my day job is like project management, and I talk to my team quite a lot. They're a really good bunch of guys. And one of them actually kind of, credit to him, Andy, he suggested the name of the album when I said I'm doing one, because I talk about the critical path quite a lot. And I don't know if it's a term you're familiar with, but it's basically about the longest route to complete a project from start to finish, basically. The critical path is your route, all the things you've got to do along the way in order to achieve the end of the project, basically.
So that's right from the kernel of the idea, the suggestion, the brief, or the request, or whatever, right the way through to the execution and basically, every single stage involved in that way.
Absolutely. So I say it quite a lot in my job, because it's like, okay, we're going to change the critical path, we're going to move this around and all of this. So it was kind of a standing joke from a work perspective. And he's like, oh, it's a really cool name though, you should think about it. Then the more I thought about it, I thought actually it works quite well in a number of ways for me. One is that I suppose, at the age I'm at, kind of finally managing to do an album. It's kind of been a big, long project of arriving at this point anyway. So that there was that side of it. And then I think I'm also quite self-critical as well. So kind of taking a critical path on what I'm doing, it's kind of different play on the words and stuff as well.
Right, go on. Yeah, I love that. I love the fact then that your kind of day job, where with a lot of producers who have a day job, they have a 9 to 5, when you're in the studio, when they're making music, tend to leave their job outside of the studio in that way. But you've the dialogue, the discourse, the jungle kind of conversations about your art have bled into your normal day job then, which I think is fascinating. So your team, your colleagues and peers rate what you do, support what you do, and are aware of what you do.
Yeah, they are. They're
some people will keep it like a dual identity, almost like Clark Kent and Superman type of thing, and they will not talk about their art in their work at all. And they almost like that kind of, they hold something back. Whereas with you, you've shared this with your team and they're really supportive. That's brilliant in itself.
Yeah, definitely. They are super supportive, and it's an interesting thing. But I think like a few of them have come to our nights, so they know what we're about. They know it's a passion for me. I've worked for the company a long time, so they all know me as the person who DJ for years and years. And then it became, the person who's making tunes as well, and the person who's running events. And so, they kind of all know this is a passion for me away from work. So it's good. But it's a good, friendly place and very supportive company. So, it's good to have that.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And the other point that you touched upon there was obviously your age. Like you are a new generation producer in that you are in your first kind of, few years of releasing in that type of way and developing yourself. But this has been, music has been part of your life, and you had a career and a history as a promoter many years ago, and as a DJ, as you said, like years before. But the production, this is all relatively new, and I love this. I know I'm a few years older than you again, I think. We're definitely in that kind of same era. I can't remember, but we're both in our 40s. It's not the usual time that you would expect somebody to be releasing their debut album, but after so much more of a journey and so much more to say, it's likely that the album is going to have a bit more depth to it because you've had more experience, really. So I think it's exciting when anybody reaches a kind of release milestone or a real breakthrough at an older age or an age that people don't expect, because I think that's really exciting. It bucks the usual kind of trends and it's going to be saying something different. The first example that springs to mind is when I interviewed Randall when he released his debut EP at 50. You could have all this history of music, but to actually kind of release a body of work at a certain age, again, I think is a really significant thing and makes this album and this whole discussion and what you're doing really kind of stand out and inspire me, really, I think.
Yeah, no, that's cool to hear. I think, totally. I think the album that I'm making now, I can't imagine what it would sound like if I'd made it 20 years ago, but it'd be a very different vibe. I think the music I was into was different. I think there's a lot more influences absorbed. I think a lot about my style, and I think what I produce, I think I was influenced by probably having more time on my hands around the early era and kind of lockdown and stuff like that as well. And the type of music I listened to then, I think it's probably created a more insular environment for me because I work from home pretty regular. And so, I'm sort of surrounded by music a bit more. It's not like headphones. And so I tend to veer towards stuff that's a bit more I guess somewhere I can channel my emotions a little bit as well. And I think that probably comes through in the LP a bit as well. Yeah, there's a long history there, as you say, and we talked about it. I know before in the previous interview, but yeah, obviously running events. I do think I kind of look back on the events I used to run, but I think there's a lot of influence from the events I run now. The style I play at those events tends to be a bit harder. I definitely tend to play towards the dance floor more. But I think when I'm creating, when I'm writing stuff, I find it hard to make a tune that's like totally balls to the wall. I can't listen to it for hours on end. I think it just drives me a bit spare, to be honest. So I tend to add a lot more musicality to the tracks, I think, and a lot more warmth. Quite the opposite, I think, of a lot of dance music nowadays.
Yeah, or where a lot of modern, certainly within drum and bass production, is just literally, it feels like it's there for shock and awe tactics, like for kind of chops and stuff like that, or drops. Whereas there is a ferociousness in your sound, but I think it's in the energy and in the consistency. I mean, there's a track called Frontiers, which is really kind of, like it's got that kind of, there's a persistence, but it doesn't come from obvious dynamics or dramatics. It comes from more of a sense of momentum, I think, in that type of way, really.
Yeah. There's a toughness to the beats, I think, on a lot of the tracks. I tend to push those quite hard, but then leave room for the melodic elements there. And the bass tends to be pretty much pure sub on it as well, because I think I come from that background as well, of like growing up with listening to like the early Good Looking record stuff in the clubs as well, and playing that kind of vibe out. And there's plenty of room for all the different kind of bass tones in the world, but there's something about a sub in a club that just pushes through nicely that I absolutely love. And I think using that in my music leaves more space for the other elements on top as well. But yeah, you're right. I do kind of try to have that kind of driving kind of groove to the tracks and a kind of momentum, and try and use, I use a lot of like orchestral instruments and stuff in there, and I try and use those to drive the tracks forward a bit. I think a lot of the influence, I think, on my style comes from like cinematic scores and things like that. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think, if you're watching a film and I don't know, someone's getting chased down a road or whatever, the music's kind of pounding, there's drive there, but it's not like oppressive sounds. It's, it can still just be strings and things like that, and horns and brass and stuff like that. And so, that's a place where I tend to come from with a lot of creativity. I try and find some emotion. I think in any track I'm doing, it doesn't really matter what that emotion is, but I'll tend to hammer around and just jam until I find an emotion I can kind of hang my hat on that tune and then kind of run with it.
You can feel that as well, and it's really interesting you mentioned scores, because I think there's that you're painting from a very distinct palette, and always have been since the launch of the label and since you've come through as a producer, which is that kind of foundation. You mentioned Good Looking just now, that kind of foundation, the primordial kind of era of jungle as it's coming out of hardcore and got all of these elements and scores, and especially like concepts and themes of sci-fi were hugely influential to jungle producers at the time as well, really, weren't they? And I think it's that kind of that's another kind of consistency that you've had as a producer, which maybe you wouldn't have had 20 years ago, as you touched on before, is that you are using a very distinct kind of you are creating and sculpting a very distinct sound, aren't you, on the label, and you as a producer yourself, you and the kind of peers that you've got on the label are kind of kindred spirits in that way, really, aren't you?
I think so, yeah. I think Clayton latched onto this quite a bit with the artwork as well, really, and he sort of said it's kind of like a retro futurism. It's kind of like looking back in some of the samples and so on. A lot of them come from old sci-fi films and things like that, but then also often kind of looking forwards in terms of the sound as well. But I think it's kind of a kind of an optimistic future, I suppose, really. I think it's a funny one. Somewhere sort of along the line, I think sort of around the late 90s into noughties, like Matrix is a touch point for this as a film. but somewhere things sort of shifted from this sort of wholly optimistic view of the future that I think the 60s and 70s and 80s had, to this kind of more dystopian kind of worldview. And a lot of that shaped, politics, and it shaped the way the world's evolved. And, you only got to look at things like AI and so on, and how that's changing the world. And I can understand why people would be pessimistic about it. But I think, like, what I tend to kind of latch onto is that kind of, retrofuturism and that optimism about what's going to happen next. And it's kind of probably like a little bit naive and a little bit sort of hopeful. There's an
kind of
album,
need that at the moment, though, I think, don't we?
Yeah.
I think, there's a time and a place for kind of spelling out the stark realities of where we are now or where we're heading. But I think we get so much of that from our feeds at the moment that I'm definitely looking for warmth and hope in music. Some days you need that absolute apocalyptic headbutt, and that resonates with how you feel. But other times, I mean, it's almost like I said, the musical equivalent of a cuddle in a way, or just like, some type of soothing thing, like, no, it's going to be all right. There's goodness in the world. There's emotions, there's feeling. And I think sometimes, especially when in the real world we're faced with so much negativity, that warmth and that sense of hope is all the more important at certain times for music. I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, we've spoken about the future quite a lot. We're actually going to run a premiere, aren't we, on Neon Future? So, I mean, that track really kind of stood out to me, I think, because the beat pattern was different. Again, it's got that sense of momentum. It's got that kind of feeling that it's building all of the time. I've got it on my USB and it's ready for me to play in my sets and stuff now. Like, I'm really looking forward to mixing around with it and playing with it. Tell us about that particular track and where that kind of comes into the 3 years that you've been curating and thinking about this album.
Yeah, so with that track, I tried to do like a kind of a slightly different spin on jungle techno. I heard a lot of like atmospheric jungle tunes and kind of atmospheric drum and bass and this kind of floatiness and dreaminess to the tracks. But I hadn't heard too many tracks that had done that with a 4/4 kind of kick rhythm and stuff to it as well. So kind of stumbled across the kind of little hat loop, sort of this kind of a hat and clap loop that kind of is in the lead here. Stumbled across that on like an old sample pack, and that was kind of a bit of an inspiration to get moving on it. But a lot of it is, the rest of the sounds are kind of just big pads, kind of drenched in reverb. And then there's kind of a gradually kind of evolving vibe to it. Again, kind of quite heavy bass to it, kind of a nice groove and a nice pattern. And then it's just, I don't know, it's just quite a relaxing kind of warm vibe to it. But it seems to work quite well. I've played it out a few times and like people seem to kind of respond to it quite well on the dance floor and stuff as well.
Brilliant. That's great. I mean, I think it sounds like, when you've talked about kind of road testing a lot of these tracks, the beauty of having your own night, having your own community, running, kind of playing locally and building up this album over such a period of time. You've road tested all of these tracks on the dance floor. You understand. They've probably all been tweaked and reworked as a result of a few different plays on the dance floor. And you've been able. This is a product very much of kind of flipping it from more of a kind of when you're writing at home and you don't make tougher stuff. You have still tested a lot of this out in the clubs and stuff like that. I'd imagine every track really.
Yeah, pretty much all of it's been played out at some point. Yeah. So. That's incredibly useful having that opportunity, and I'm really pleased with the venues we work with in Southampton that they let us kind of do as we want really with our events. All three of the places that we've run with have been super relaxed and just let us get on with it really. And yeah, I think we've built up a little reputation in the area. Our nights seem to be really well received, but the good thing of having a label there alongside it is, not only just with my own stuff, but with other artists' stuff on the label. Yeah, it's great. I can go in and play a set and, chuck in a few of the tracks and see how they're sounding, and sometimes coming back and tweaking them and refining them. Yeah, for sure. And that's been the same with mine, but some of the other artists as well, kind of gone back into the, let's just tweak that bit a little bit, or go back in on the bass a little bit more. The response wasn't quite what we expected when we put it through on the rig and things. So it does all help.
Okay.
it means so much more than a label, and it means so much more than a night then, isn't it? This is where real communities are created and fostered over, you know, kind of when you're getting guests from, you know, all over the UK and beyond. This is where, you know, the kind of community, this is where you kind of bring people together in that type of way and create a real culture, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great. We've had a few of the artists from the label come down and play. I mean, one's as far afield as Mineral from Finland, and Kruger came over from the US and played with us as well. And that was amazing to meet those guys. But kind of more local, we had Non-Rev come up from Wales. We've had Fortune and Chance from Bournemouth, and Misson as well, who they're all artists I really rate and really respect. And I think it's been, I don't know, it's been great to meet them face to face. And a few of them I've met 2 or 3 times now. And yeah, you know, it makes a different connection, right, from just sort of chatting online. I'd like to do more of our artists, but because it's such a small night, it's always difficult to kind of pin it all in. But should be getting to meet TRC2 soon, and so hopefully having a spin alongside him, and yeah, obviously see Adam again soon on Red.
Yeah, I mean, well, Adam is one person. I was going to highlight him and Oki because they are the 2 artists who've actually released albums, artist albums by so far. You've done quite a lot of VAs, but yeah, in terms of kind of artist albums, and I was wondering if there was anything that you took from the whole release process, the creative journey that you've been on with them from a label management point of view, a label owning point of view, and whether you'd learned anything of that, which you can either see in the delivery of the Critical Path, or anything about the Critical Path that have been influenced by other hats that you wear within your kind of musical roles, if you like.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've learned a huge amount through running the label. I think in terms of my own production, it's helped a lot. I mean, you know, I have to listen to quite a lot of pre-masters, and you know, sometimes pick holes in those to get the tracks to the best point they can possibly be. So, you know, it is about listening with a very critical ear, very carefully kind of identifying what might need improving on that track before I send it to the mastering stage. So that I think has helped me have a keen ear. It's helped in terms of mix downs, what's working, what's not working, what might come up at the mastering stage that I'm going to have to correct. So trying to step in and pick that up front. I think in terms of those two releases you specifically mentioned, I think both of the artists had a fairly clear vision in terms of what they wanted in terms of artwork, particularly with Adam's design. I think that's a super cool, kind of really unique design on that LP. The Oki one is quite influenced by the early GLR era, I think. So he was very specific about what he wants, and I think that ties in with his sound as well. Adam's one probably has a little bit, again, more of that retro futurism kind of look to it as well. But yeah, I work really closely with the artwork designer, and so all the text and all the layout and the sort of focus of the package as a whole, even though those releases haven't yet been able to put them on vinyl. Maybe, you know, we'll do something like that one day if this one goes right. But I think it's really nice just to have something that, you know, you can show for your work, really. Yeah. I think it would have been all too easy for us as a label to spend 2 years and have nothing other than digital files to show for it. But, you know, I'll run a label for how many years I run a label. But at the end of that, when that finishes, it's nice to have something that I can go, okay, yeah, we've got these CDs and we've got this LP and this is on vinyl. Yeah. You know, we've done a load of dub plates as well and things like that. And those are the things you're going to remember at the end of it.
So this is your, you know, to do a debut album, and it's kind of, you know, this brings us nicely full circle to the first question. You've probably been building up to this. I know you messaged me on the day that it arrived. We were talking anyway, and you showed me the photos. Your album had just arrived in a box at the time, and I could feel the excitement just off your email alone. So tell us all about the vinyl, and this must have been such a buzz, really, to see this back, all of this hard work back in vinyl form.
Yeah, I know. It's been an amazing process to work through. It's the first time I've gone end to end on it. So I was kind of learning as an artist, but then also as a label owner as well, really.
Wow.
But I've had a lot of guidance and support along the way. I think there's been sort of 3-4 people, obviously, sort of, that have been really key to this. Really, obviously Clayton with the art, Mike Vapor. So he runs 36 Hertz, and he's a good friend of mine. Comes to our night all the time. He's been just mega helpful because he's had a lot of stuff on vinyl, like on big labels as well. So. And runs his own label and has done loads of presses on that. So he then put me in touch with Simon Underground Music as well, who Simon looked after the pressing side of it, looked after all of the sleeves and all of that, and then we'll be looking after a fair bit of our distribution as well to various stores and things. So he'll kind of sit on bits of stock for us, away from the kind of Bandcamp side of it. But also then the last one's Bo Thomas as well, who's done the mastering. And I'm a huge fan of Bo's work as an artist, when he was in Intense and Babylon Time Warp as well. And
his fingerprints are all over Jungle in so many different ways. Like, you know, and it's, anybody who's got any kind of knowledge of the history, whether it's him as a producer or just what he's done as a mastering engineer to elevate the sound and elevate the craft, really. Yeah, that must be great. And it must have been great for you to kind of see the whole journey through and be part of the whole journey through, like you say, from end to end, really. If you're going to release your debut album in this type of way, to actually have such a hands-on role and be learning, but have such an input. Tell us more about the artwork. You've mentioned Clayton a few times. So Clayton is a fascinating individual, isn't he?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I'll put it up again just briefly, and then I'll spin it onto the back. But Clayton designed all of the artwork, and it's collage style. His background is in kind of visual sampling, I suppose, really. He's influenced by the sampling within drum and bass and within hip hop that applies that style in a visual sense. So, you know, he'll be taking snips from old books and old posters and all sorts of interesting stuff like that, and then works in a kind of a collage style to bring all that together. He came, when I approached him about doing this, sent him the album, and he was super keen to do it. He really liked the feel of it, really liked the kind of, in his words, kind of epic scope of it and stuff. And so he basically, with the collages, I think, took a lot of imagery from old kind of 1940s films. And the idea of the images is basically that it's kind of a new sci-fi story, effectively, that he's kind of created with that imagery. So, if you kind of look through them, in theory, they're set into a sort of sequential order that follows a critical path and follows a critical kind of route through from start to finish of a story. But they're telling this kind of untold 1940s kind of sci-fi movie, basically. And so the rest of the kind of visual side of it, I worked with Clayton on the text and so on. So I did all the text. And then the label design, that was myself as well. And then Clayton's eye on it all the way through. So we kind of worked on that together. And then I'll flip to the vinyl quickly. But
look at that. That's lush. Wow.
It's super cool. So that side of it, again, comes from the colour scheme of the vinyl, the kind of grey and red and black, really. And when we were talking to Simon about doing the pressing run and so on, he was just like, we'll do, main part of the run with black, but at the end of it, we can just start chucking colours in, and we'll swirl a few colours around and see what comes out. And then,
brilliant.
Settled on the colours, and I was like, okay, we'll wait and see what it looks like. And then he sent me the photos through it. I think Simon was as excited about it as well. He was just like so stoked with how they came out. So,
brilliant. This is where it gets down to like a release being a work of art in so many different ways, really, then, isn't it? So, I mean, how many, this is a big investment for you as well, and isn't it? Like to release, as you said, like, vinyl is a huge investment anyway, really. But what are the realities of that? If anybody's sitting there watching, like, oh my God, I'd love to release my debut album and, kind of create a situation where I could put it on vinyl. How much of an investment is that, and how much stress has it caused you? How many hairs have you lost over it?
Yeah, well, I was already grey anyway before I started, so So that side of it wasn't too bad. But yeah, it to do a double album is quite a significant financial investment. There's no doubt about that. The prices, as I understand it, have shot up a lot. So it's a fair chunk of your salary, a fair chunk of saving for quite a sustained period to put to one side. This particular release, I didn't want to create any risk for our label, so I've completely self-funded it. So,
Oh wow, go on. I love that.
because the situation, I think, if I put the label in this and it didn't do well, then that risks the label. And we've released music from probably 50 artists so far. So I don't want to put my personal goals in terms of wanting to release something, create a situation if it didn't do well, that okay, sorry guys, we're not going to be releasing your music anymore because we can't pay your royalties or whatever. So I basically injected the funds into the label to pay for this release, and then obviously hopefully recoup a bit of it back to keep my wife happy.
I really hope you do, and I imagine you will, because there is a following for the label, there's a community around the label, and the biggest thing that I like pushing really with One More Thing is that it's not about huge sense of scales. This isn't about pushing units and units and units. It's about developing a really solid following of people who are into what you do and really get what you do and want to support it. And in that way, when you see small batch runs of anything, it doesn't even have to be music, like small batch things are incredibly exciting, because you know that you and only maybe 50 or 100 people might have that in the world, and that you've got something really special. And I think that's what I really love about the kind of the craft of a label, and the craft of you've crafted your own debut album in that way to bring us love in a really nice kind of full circle here. You're properly invested in this. This is something that the passion runs incredibly deep, to the point where you're saving up your own money to put into this. It's about the art, it's about the craft, it's about that final kind of product, which is everything that you've been involved in every stage of. I think that's wonderful and incredibly inspiring.
No, absolutely. I think that that's what I wanted to achieve with it, really, is something that stands alone as a piece of art, visually and sonically, really, and I think it does achieve that. I think it's come out exactly as I hoped.
That's amazing. Congratulations on such a brilliant accomplishment there. And what comes up next now? What follows your album?
So as far as Codename, plenty. We've got albums coming from Mineral and TRC2. So they're both TRC2, I think I'm just waiting for the pre-masters to come through, but it's a lovely album. The Mineral one I've got back mastered, and I've started dropping a few tunes in my mixes here and there, and that is brilliant. Just absolutely stoked. Ilka's like one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and so I'm just stoked that he's comfortable working with us and having an album out with us. We've released a few of his tracks to date, I think people will kind of really put that one, and I think will make people's ears prick up, because it's a really good example of his style. You've got this kind of musicality on one side. He's a really talented pianist, and I think he's been playing instruments since he was kind of 8-10 years old or something like that. So there's a long talent. But also then, like, on the flip side, there's these like super grimy tech step tunes on there as well that are really heavy, like dance floor track. And it's a fascinating album. And the TRC2 one's excellent as well. Really good kind of example of his vibe. And then we've got there's an EP from Adam Non-Rev incoming. That's really good. Petrol Nights. That's out a few weeks after mine. We've got an excellent EP from Starsky. Really great EP from Flipper, which is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of got summery festival vibes to it. I'll have to send it to you. But it feels like you're just in a field in the middle of summer. It's just got all these kind of warm brass and kind of real funky jazzy kind of groove to it. I'll send you that over. That's the kind of third in our series of the Crate Digs EP. I think
Brilliant. Yeah.
the track that in the city that I put out with you guys, that when we put it out on Codename later, went on the first Crate Digs. So
right. Cool.
I sort of originally intended that as a sort of, I like the name of it. It was all kind of digging through crates on the tune, so I kind of went with it as an EP of mine. Thought nothing of it, and then a couple of artists then came to me and were like, "We'd like to do a Crate Digs. Can we do one, please?" So, we released one from Day to Be the other day, which had this kind of samba Brazilian vibe to some of the tracks on it, and a kind of sort of jazz funk fusion kind of feel to some of the other tracks. And then the Flipper one kind of runs with it even more on that theme, and I absolutely love what he's done. So and then there's a couple of other newer artists that we've not released before, with some bits forthcoming as well. And I think as far as me on the label, I'm starting to organise a remix LP of The Critical Path.
Wow, already? Wow, go on.
Yeah. So the plan is to put that out probably March next year. So I'm just in the process of talking to remixers at the moment, and got a few of the label crew on board, and then just waiting to hear back from a couple of other people. But there's plans to make that a really special project for next year. Just starting to get the stems together and send that out. Other than that, it's been kind of nice, like just creating some stuff for myself and creating some new tunes in a different vibe without feeling that it's for an album or for a big project. So I finished maybe 6 or 7 tracks, started road testing those in my sets. Some of them are quite musical, some of them are a bit harder, some are a bit more ravey, just kind of exploring a few different sounds, really, a few different styles. I think I want to do some stuff with some other labels more as well. I think the last year or so, last 2 years, has been all my output has gone through Codename, and I've loved doing that. But the reality, I think, of this scene as an artist is to grow. You kind of need to put things out with different people as well.
Reach out to different communities, really, isn't it? And link with different audiences. Yeah, totally.
Sure, yeah. And I think I do create a lot of stuff that's in different styles, so it's quite nice to then do an EP that hopefully will fit with this label or that label. So I think that there will be a bit of that for the next period, and there's a couple of labels that I'm talking to already, and so it's just time. I think my approach to kind of making music, though, is kind of I catch a vibe and run with it. So I tend to let the tunes lead me in a direction rather than going, right, I'm going to make 4 tunes in this style. So consequently, that might mean it's quite a while before stuff that fits, like 4 tunes for one label or whatever. But that's definitely the plan. And it was kind of reinforced. Storm played one of the tracks, Frontiers, on our show the other day, and she was sort of saying much the same thing after. She was talking about myself, and she was talking about Moakz as well, and Hobbsy, and some of the other artists she's been supporting recently. And she was kind of making that point that really, if you want to kind of reach the peak in terms of an artist, then you've got to get some stuff on the big labels. So for me, I would like to also get some stuff out to some other labels. I love every label I've worked with so far. Omni Music, particularly, Chris, is like, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be running the label. I wouldn't have released this album if it wasn't for Chris's influence early on. Cool. And I definitely, want to still do stuff with the labels that I've already worked with today. But I would like to start reaching out and getting in contact with a few long established labels, because they're bucket list things, right? Aren't they?
Yeah. Bucket list, very much like a debut album, really, kind of bringing us back to that first point now. So I wish you all the best of luck with all of those. But in the meantime, everybody who's watching this, thank you very much for watching, first of all. And please do check out The Critical Path, as we've just been talking about for the last 40 or so minutes. A hell of a lot of love and just passion for the craft and the detail, and the whole process has gone into this, really, hasn't it, Moakz? So congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing what comes next.
One more thing.